Hello, my name is Brett, and I'm the Director of Sales here in San Francisco. Welcome to this talk called Say to Excel with the new Odoo Spreadsheets feature. First off, this talk, it's not going to be a detailed tutorial of how to do everything in the Spreadsheets tool. You'll find other resources for that. My main goals here are to first explain why we made the Spreadsheets feature and why we're so excited about it, and then provide a few examples of how businesses might use it in Odoo. Different use cases. So first off, why are we excited? Why did we actually develop this? Are we actually trying to replace Excel? Are we trying to replace Google Sheets 100%? And the answer is no, not really, we're not. It's really all about giving you better business intelligence, as we know business intelligence today. We believe that business intelligence should be very efficient. It's becoming increasingly important if you want your company to succeed. So what we mean by it is, honestly, it's a big general term that includes a lot of different processes and a lot of different methods for different purposes. But the main goal of BI is to make your business more efficient through data-driven analysis of how the different parts of your company are performing. And so similarly, we really believe that the way that we actually use BI tools, that also needs to be very efficient. To have really amazing BI functionality, it's largely about being able to grab your data and then analyze it, usually using formulas or calculations, and then, of course, have the power to update both that data and update the way that you're analyzing it over time so that it scales and doesn't create unnecessary work for you. When it comes to the extraction part, extracting data, getting it out of the system so you can work with it, I think it's really important to remember that ever since Fabian began Odoo as Tiny ERP back in the early 2000s, our platform has done an amazing job at solving a really, really old problem, which is how multiple different softwares and tools interact with each other. The same applies right here. Many of you that are familiar with Odoo's biggest strength of built-in integration won't need the reminder, but it's important to point out that the world of data analytics and business intelligence is the same old story as connecting sales and accounting, or it's the same old story as connecting e-commerce with your warehouse. Basically, we're going to focus on the traditional idea of turning the data that you have in your business software into spreadsheets for you to analyze or use. And before we even get into that, I think first off, it's something that needs to be commented on real quick, because I've heard this question a few times recently, which is why use spreadsheets at all if we have a high-tech business solution like Odoo, or if we have some other ERP for that matter. Basically, it's just a matter of how complex businesses can be and also being practical. Because businesses are unique. Even really robust and elaborate ERP platforms out there, they don't necessarily have every single type of forecasting. Or maybe they don't compare budgets to a series of different goals and display it, that info the way that you want them to. Or maybe they don't actually have a good way to calculate commission that matches exactly how your business needs to work. Of course, it's also possible that those things do exist exactly how you need in some particular system, but maybe in that case, unfortunately, sometimes it's just a very expensive feature and you can't really afford it. Either you or your customer can't afford it. Or maybe it can be developed, custom built, but to do that would be way too expensive, would take too much time, and it could be difficult to maintain that over time too. Spreadsheets, on the other hand, they're always going to be really easy to work with, and they can apply to a ton of different BI use cases. Not only are they easy to set up, but they're usually really easy to change and modify them. So any of the built-in calculations you have can change as your business changes. Whereas if something is developed with code in a platform, it's never going to be as quick or as accessible to the user or the admin. And also another reason is sometimes it's just a matter of adoption. Significantly more business owners and users, they know how to use spreadsheets. CEOs and business owners, they're familiar with spreadsheets. They used them in school, they've used them in their whole working lives. That's way more common knowledge than the ability to write Python code. So our goal, it's not to pretend that spreadsheets are not useful, because they will always be useful, especially to small to mid-sized businesses, and especially to growing enterprises. In other words, Odoo clients. So assuming that we need spreadsheets to serve some purposes for our business, we got to get that data that we have and put it into spreadsheet form. Okay, so with that background and context, ta-da! Now we are excited to bring you our solution to those problems. You can now have the advantages of spreadsheet functionality without worrying about any of those traditional challenges of trying to extract your data. And I'm going to touch on a few different examples of how this might be used. I'm going to start off really simple, and again, this is not intended to be training. It's more of a showcase of some potential ways to use this. But I want to get you all thinking about how you might benefit from it. And I also want you to look out for ways where you might say, oh, I won't need to do this in Excel or Google Sheets anymore. Or you might say, you know, I was planning on having this developed, but now maybe I can use Odoo spreadsheets for this instead. So let's get going. So first off, you need to know it all starts with pivot tables. All Odoo spreadsheets are fed by pivot tables in Odoo reporting, just like this one here. So if you look at any pivot table in Odoo that shows you some data, that can be used in the Spreadsheets tool. As you may already know, the pivot table functionality in Odoo, it's really pretty strong already. You can filter and group by any of the relevant fields in this model. Like in this case, we're looking at sales. So you can filter by and group by anything that's related to sales. And then you can put whatever you want in the x-axis, you can put whatever you want in the y-axis, and you can group down or drill down further if you need to. And of course, you can also choose whatever measures you want. So we could say count, order number, untaxed total, that kind of stuff. It's powerful. It's a good tool, and we've had it for quite a while. However, there are big limitations to pivot tables, mostly around the fact that you can't manipulate any of the data that's on here. You can't perform calculations in this view. Not only that, but it's restricted to just this data set of sales analysis. So looking at this, we can't compare it side by side with other things like purchase information or costing information. But now once you have your pivot table set up the way you need, now with our new tool, we can click Insert in Spreadsheet, as you can see. And when you click that button, you're going to be given a choice to either create a whole new spreadsheet, or you can add it into an existing spreadsheet to document the data or to something that already has data in it. Once you confirm that, there you go. Right away, it'll take that data from the pivot table and it's going to stick it into a spreadsheet form inside the platform. So we're still in Odoo. It didn't send it somewhere else. It's in Odoo. And then the real fun begins. Now we can actually take that data and we can do things to it. So you can delete any of the columns and rows that you don't want and you don't need. You can then change the formatting however you need. You can cut and paste to move things around. So if you want to take one row and bring it up to the top, you know, things like that. But most importantly, you can start actually interacting with the data using the same kinds of formulas and the same kinds of calculations that you would see in Excel and in Google Sheets. One of the most valuable benefits is that this data is going to continuously update in real time because it's not static or frozen in time at the point you generated the spreadsheet. It'll real-time update. So if I were to go into the sales app and then go into one of these sales orders, for example, for any of these customers, and if I were to make some changes, like add some more products or change quantities or change prices, then that change is going to reflect on the spreadsheet as well. So more specifically, I'd like to give you some idea of the full potential of this tool as it pertains to the Odoo platform that we all know and love. To use spreadsheets inside of Odoo, you're going to need the Documents app. We've had the Documents app available for a couple years now, but for many of us, I'm pretty sure that the Documents app is about to become a lot more popular than it was before. The thing is, one of the reasons why this tool is such a game changer for Odoo is that it can be used across all the major apps. So, although all the spreadsheets will be managed and accessed inside the Documents app, the data is going to come from the different apps you have in your database. We just saw it come from sales to documents in that example. But it can take information as well from accounting, any accounting reports. So yeah, that financial data can feed in there. Or really any app where you have data. You know, it could be an inventory report. It could be costing information from manufacturing. It could be timesheet data from projects. That's the real power. So now I'm going to highlight a few different use cases from a few different apps, although the uses are going to go way beyond that. So let's start really, really simple. One way that you're going to use spreadsheets in Odoo is just to run a very quick ad hoc report. In other words, you might not need to analyze your data like this all the time or even ever again. But in the moment, if you want to draw some quick conclusions, it's a great way to do it. As you can see, this spreadsheet here was generated from a simple pivot table of sales with products up along the top. These are the products right here that were sold. and then by the date of the order down on the left. This came from a pivot table. So anyway, after generating the spreadsheet, you can simply add rows and add columns anywhere into the spreadsheet, and then you can add formulas like this little very simple formula here that shows us the change in sales from the previous day. So over here we had 80 sold here, 35 sold here. This is the calculation. It's just a simple subtraction showing what it is. And then you'll be happy to know that conditional formatting works great in Odoo spreadsheets. So it can easily highlight things like negative or positive or certain value thresholds with color changes. Big fan of that. Now, it's obviously a really simple formula, but it's extremely valuable to keep in mind that as the data changes in the sales app and you get more sales, the spreadsheet's going to continuously update without having to export anything or without having to worry about any integrations. You just go into the Documents app at any time and you'll be able to view the report as it updates in real time. Another example that's pretty valuable, this time it's using pivot table data from the CRM app. Now I chose CRM because it makes a lot of sense here, but you'll see that this type of report is going to work anywhere in the system because it's really just a report of activities logged. It's how many calls were logged by a user in a day. And if you know Odoo, you can log activities in pretty much any app, wherever there's a chatter. So it works for help desk, it's going to work for project, inventory, so on and so forth. The purpose here is to use the spreadsheet tool in order to give your employees very clear KPIs and then let them or let a manager view their progress towards those KPI goals over time. So in this scenario, let's say that we want our salespeople to make 20 calls per day. It's a pretty achievable goal. So these cells here, as you can see, they're fed by a pivot table that's monitoring the number of calls that were logged each day per sales rep. And you'll find that after you bring the pivot table in, you can manipulate the look and the feel of it by reformatting however you need, or you can bring in data from multiple pivot tables. So as you can see, this is 1 week per user, and then here's another week down below here per user logging in their activities, their calls. So anyway, then I added this column over here that takes the average number of calls made for the week. It's just looking at those, getting the average, and then I put a little conditional rule that highlights it if they're under the goal of 20 per day. So this person averaged only 18, averaged only 16, therefore it highlighted it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but still useful for a KPI. So while that's certainly nice to look at, one of the more powerful aspects of our tool is that you're able to feed multiple pivot table reports into a single spreadsheet document, and it's organized into multiple individual sheets, just like with Excel or just like with Google Sheets. So what we have on this sheet, it's a report of just the calls that were made so far today, shown in column B. So it's just the daily amount of calls. It's not for the week, it's just today. But it's being fed in from a pivot table. Then over here we got columns C and columns D. They're just calculated with very basic formulas. This is how far we are along to the goal of 20 calls for the day in terms of a percentage. And then this is how many calls are remaining. So very, very simple calculations. But then this column over here, column E, it's taking the weekly average from that first sheet I showed you, and then it's comparing it to that. So this way you can compare not only how are they doing today, but how are they doing compared to the average. And of course the main value here is that we're having two sheets that are interacting with each other inside of Odoo. And so, honestly, KPIs, they're extremely critical to both the individual and the manager to see who's doing the best, who needs to improve, what the trends are over time. It's especially valuable these days if your employees are all quarantined and working from home, and it's not easy to see who's being productive, or at least not right away. It's great to have little KPIs like this. And then also important to point out, for any of these spreadsheets, you can save them. Once you built them out, you formatted and stuff, you can save them into a template, however you want. So if you want, you can create a new spreadsheet that follows the same template, but maybe it relates to a different data set entirely. And then in fact, you'll be able to access a few default templates that we give you on any new V14 database. We're going to add more over time, but for now there's ones for commissions, there's one for budgets. You'll see the built-in templates that come with it. So yeah, again, KPIs, they can be used like this all across Odoo as needed, and it solves a problem that we've had in the past where people have a very specific idea for what they want KPIs to be, and it's hard to have a one-size-fits-all approach. Okay, so I'm going to fly through a few more examples very briefly before we wrap up. Commission. It's probably probably the single biggest reason why we're excited about the new Odoo Spreadsheets tool, because for years and years, customers have asked us, hey, how come you can't calculate commissions in Odoo out of the box? Or they're wondering, why don't we have a commissions app? Why haven't we developed a specific commissions app? And honestly, commissions for paying sales reps or paying third-party reps or whatever, it can get pretty complicated. Salespeople might have multiple tiers of commission pay rate. There might be multiple tiers. Maybe some products get a certain rate, and maybe other products have a different rate. Maybe some things get commissioned, some things don't. It could be based off of a multiplier. It could be a flat payout. It could be all sorts of things. There could be caps, there could be accelerators, and so on and so forth. So commissions can get really complicated. And it's definitely the kind of thing where commission rules tend to change over time as organizations grow. So, you develop it now, but then in a year as your organization scales up, or you have to change some things about your organization, you have to go back and you have to completely change it. So yeah, really a spreadsheet is ideal for the world of commission calculation. So there's tons of ways that you might want to approach it in Odoo, whether it's based off of CRM activity, or whether it's based off of sales order lines, or if it's based off of invoices. In this example, I'm basing it off of sales order lines. And a great way to handle commissions is to have one sheet, as you can see here, that serves as a overall table of different rates. So you might have different rates per sales rep. You might have different rates based on the volume, as you can see here. And maybe the rate's going to be multiplied by the dollar amount, or maybe the rate is going to be multiplied based on quantity sold, who knows. Anyway, you have all that commission rate data here in one sheet. It's a rate table, essentially. And these fields right here, they may or may not be fed in by some special fields that you create on your users or on your employees. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from this table. It can come from somewhere in the platform with custom fields or something. And then the way that you could make it work is that you could have another sheet and the same document that's pulling in data from a sales report pivot table like here, and it shows the sales of products per rep. So here's products per rep, organized, looks nice and neat. And then you can have some detailed if expressions, for example, that will pull in the correct commission rate from your previous commission rate table that we were just looking at. I think if expressions will really be your best friend in a situation like this. Things like identifying which product it is, or identifying the quantity that were sold, things like that correspond with a rate from the previous table. Then, of course, you have a cell where the commission's actually calculated. Maybe you'll put if statements in there, as well as if there are some other factors you want to consider, like maybe a minimum quantity or a cap or something. In any event, for a deep dive on commissions, there's another talk happening this year that I recommend you watch. But no matter what, you'll probably find that to approach every company's requirements case by case, you'll need to approach it differently every time to find the best way to set it up. But the tools are there. Okay, one last really quick example before we wrap up. One of the preset templates we'll provide for you is for quarterly budgets based on all the ledger activity for your different accounts in the accounting app. It's pretty great, actually, because some of you may or may not know that we actually already had a budgets tool in Odoo, but it's not exactly the same thing. The budgets tool we already have, it's really more about setting budgets for projects or specific account positions. And the challenge with that tool is that you really need to set it up in advance, and it's not necessarily always the fastest way to monitor a budget. But now with a spreadsheet like this that we have, you can have any of your chart of accounts ledger info coming from journal entries. You can have that populate a spreadsheet, and then you can compare any of those values side by side with a goal budget, as you can see here. It's nice and it's really easy to use something like this, setting a goal next to a real value. It's a perfect example of BI. It's kind of like KPIs, honestly. And it's easy to adjust it over time. It's easy to keep an eye on. And any of these spreadsheets can be quickly shared or can be exported as needed using the built-in tools we have in our Documents app. And while we're looking at a spreadsheet tool like this, I want to highlight a really nice feature that's pretty unique. It's called our filtering tool on the spreadsheets. And the filter tool, it's actually a customizable way to change the specific data that we are looking at. Filters can be date-based, they can be relational to a specific field, or it could just be searching text, one way or another. But the purpose of it is that it lets your single spreadsheet be instantly customized, kind of like how a pivot table is. It allows a single spreadsheet to basically switch over to showing you different data based on a change in the criteria. Other examples of using the filter tool are if you filter a field to show a different product that you're examining or show a different employer sales rep. So it's almost like the spreadsheet becomes sort of a place to view similar data for a bunch of different things. And that's just a few quick examples for ways to utilize it, but the options are pretty widespread. In fact, we're very curious to hear from everyone in the Odoo community to see what kind of ideas and that you have for how you want to use it. With V14, you'll be able to use our spreadsheet tool within the Odoo platform, and by doing so, you're going to save time, you're going to minimize errors, you're going to minimize the cluttered file downloads, you'll be able to maintain flexibility as your business scales, and more importantly, you're no longer going to be running and hiding from your data. You will become the master of your data. And the big question, will you still use Excel? Maybe for now, sure. Of course, there's still lots of reasons for having a tool like that. Maybe just to hold on to your data before you migrate it into Odoo. But keep in mind, this is just the first version of Odoo Spreadsheets. Maybe in 1 or 2 more versions, you'll be able to truly say you to other spreadsheet software for good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Brett, for this great presentation. How did you think it went?
I feel pretty good about it.
Right.
I think it was okay. It's just an intro, of course, but
exactly.
Hopefully it gave you some ideas for sure.
All right, great. Well, I've been looking the chat here from Brussels. I kept an eye on the chat for you to gather some of the questions. Let's use a couple of the minutes that we have right now to answer the most urgent one. If anyone wants to add some extra questions in the chat, please go ahead. But we've got quite a few already to cover, so let's jump straight into it.
Okay.
We got quite some questions on what kind of data someone can use and what kind of application. What would be, let's say, Odoo Spreadsheet one-on-one you would tell someone to know before they start using Spreadsheet to understand what they can do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that question was probably asked early on, and then maybe it was hopefully clarified. But just so everybody's clear on this, you can use the Spreadsheets feature pretty much wherever there is a pivot table in Odoo. And that even means that you could use Studio to activate a pivot table view in certain places where maybe there's only a list view. But the main thing is, if there's data that can be assembled in a pivot table view, then that can be set to a spreadsheet. So there's a lot of use cases that I don't think we've even necessarily thought of yet. But for example, if you're looking at your employee time off, that could be viewed as a spreadsheet or as a pivot table. So you can have a spreadsheet about employee time off. Right. There are some things that are like the dynamic reports in accounting, like the profit and loss. That doesn't translate into spreadsheet form, but some of the data that feeds into that, like journal entries, is viewable in pivot table form. So that data can be sent to spreadsheets.
Okay, so anyone who has questions about which app to use, just open the app, look on the right top, is the pivot view there, go and see what kind of data it is, and that's how they can use it, right?
Pretty much, yeah. And if you want to go a step further, you can activate Studio and just see if you can even activate a pivot table there, if maybe it's not already there. And if you can't find a pivot table out of it, then yeah, that data is probably not going to translate.
Okay, good. A question that came across quite often as well, because, well, people seem to be in love with this new feature. Can community users use this spreadsheet as well?
Not at this time, yeah. I can't say what's going to happen in the future, but at this current time, it does require the Documents app, which is currently an enterprise feature.
Okay, so if someone has the Document app, they can make use of the spreadsheet in any other app that they have active.
That's right. Well, now, I know that what Fabian said is that one of his goals is he wants to have more Office-type tools available in sort of an open source format. So maybe in the future, but at this time, yeah, it's enterprise.
Okay, well, that at least for those who have that enterprise and Documents right now, they can use it right after the upgrade, so that's already pretty good. There are also a lot of different use cases, but I'm already going to say right now to those who have a specific use case or additional questions, a lot come extra. You will give an extra, let's say, 8 to 10 minutes in an extended Q&A. The link will be placed in the chat afterwards by the moderator. So please have a good look at that one. A few moments we still have left for some extra questions. An answer that was quickly answered, sorry, a question that was answered. How far can we go in terms of formulas in these spreadsheets?
Yeah, I believe the number is we've currently implemented 160 formulas that you would find standard in Excel, with the goal to have more, of course. The best way to find out if your formula that you want is supported right now is just get into a trial database, type it in, and see if it's there.
Give it a go. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously we prioritize the most common ones, taking averages, taking sums, lookup, things like that.
All right. So apart from the Q&A extended session where people can jump in afterwards, we have time for one last question. And the question that I would like to ask you, are there any other talks for the Google spreadsheet that you would advise people to follow if they feel hungry for more after watching you presenting it right now?
Yeah. Good question. Because I think everybody would agree this is a whole new app and it's a whole new game changer. This is not a 20-minute talk conversation. And so we did a talk yesterday that the recording is up online, all about budgets in Spreadsheet. There is a talk today, I don't remember when, about commissions.
In about an hour, I think. Yeah.
In about an hour. And then there's advanced spreadsheet features. That's the one that everybody should go to if you have any questions at all. Okay. Advanced spreadsheet features. And I think that one can potentially have a longer Q&A session afterwards too.
All right, great. We'll have a look at those. Thank you, Brad, for being there with us. And thank you, viewers. I hope to see you soon. And have a great rest of the Odoo experience.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.